You wanted independence? Go get it!
No, please, no! Please!
Don't come back. You are a burden to me. I disown you as my daughter. I don't want to.
You wanted independence? Go get it. Don't come back. You are a burden to me. I disown you as my daughter. I don't want to see you anymore. No, please. No. No. Please. My father looked at me like I was garbage on his shoe. Then he threw my suitcase onto the grass and told me I was dead to him. 6 hours later, a stranger in a black suit handed me the keys to a $15 million house on the California coast and told me my whole family had been lying to me since I was 14. If you've ever been told you're not enough by the people who are supposed to love you most, stay with me. This story is for you. For years, I believed my dad's anger was just grief. I was wrong. It was something much darker, and it had been growing since the night my mother died. My name is Delaney Cade. My mom passed when I was 14. Cancer took her fast, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. After that, my father, Roland Cade, changed. He stopped smiling. He stopped asking how my day was. Every mistake in his life somehow became my fault. Spilled coffee, my fault. A late bill, my fault. A bad mood after work, also somehow my fault. I told myself grief does strange things to people, so I stayed quiet. I cooked. I cleaned. I kept my grades up. I made myself small so I wouldn't be a target. The only person who still looked at me like I mattered was my grandfather, Silas Cade. He used to tell me, Danny, other people's opinions of you are not facts. Don't ever confuse the two. When my mom died, he was the only reason I didn't fall apart completely. 2 years later, he died too, and after his funeral, I had nobody left who saw me. That should have been my first warning sign. It wasn't. The night everything broke, I just lost my part-time job. The diner closed, not my fault, but try telling my father that. He came home, heard the news, and something in him snapped. He called me lazy. He called me a burden. Then he walked into my room, ripped my suitcase out of the closet, and started shoving my clothes in without folding a single thing. I stood in the doorway, frozen, waiting for him to stop. He didn't. He dragged the suitcase through the hallway and threw it onto the front lawn like trash day had come early. You wanted independence, he said. Go get it. Don't come back. I looked at my Aunt Reagan standing by the stairs. I looked at my cousin Tobias, staring at his phone like nothing was happening. Nobody said a word. Nobody moved to stop him. I got in my car with one suitcase and no plan. I ended up in a Target parking lot, crying until I had nothing left, sleeping across the front seats like a stray dog. I had no idea that by sunrise, everything I thought I knew about my family would be a lie. A knock on my window woke me up. 2 people in sharp black suits stood outside my car, one holding a leather folder like it belonged in a courtroom. Are you Delaney Cade? The man asked. Granddaughter of Silas Cade? I nodded, too tired and scared to speak. We've been looking for you, he said. Your grandfather left you an inheritance. We're here to take you to your new home. I followed their black car for 40 minutes up the coast toward Newport, my hands shaking on the wheel the entire time. Part of me thought I was being scammed. Part of me thought I was dreaming. Neither turned out to be true. We stopped at an iron gate overlooking the ocean. The gate opened by itself. Behind it sat a white modern house with glass walls and a view that looked like something from a movie. Not a real life, not my life. The older attorney, a man named Callum Reyes, smiled gently. Take your time, he said. This home belongs to you now. I waited for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he handed me a folder full of legal documents, every one carrying my grandfather's signature and my name as the legal owner. Before giving me the keys, the younger attorney, Presley Doyle, pulled out a cream envelope sealed in dark wax. "He wanted you to read this first," she said, "before anything else." My hands shook as I opened it. My grandfather's handwriting stared back at me, and I started crying before I read a single word. He wrote that if I was holding this letter, the day he feared had finally come. He said he always suspected my father would choose anger over love someday. He wasn't angry when he wrote it. He sounded heartbroken. He told me not to let bitterness take over my heart, because there were things I still didn't know, and judging too fast would only hurt me more. Then one sentence made my whole body go still: "This house was never the real inheritance. It's only the beginning," he said. Every question I'd carried since my mother died would be answered, but only if I was patient. Each letter, he promised, would reveal one more piece of the truth. I held that letter to my chest, and for the first time in years, felt like someone actually saw me. I spent the afternoon wandering through the house, trying to convince myself it was real. Every room felt like my grandfather had built a hiding place for me long before I knew I'd need one. As the sun dropped, I heard cars outside the gate. The security guard called up to say my father and several relatives were demanding to be let in. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't told a single soul where I was. I watched them on the camera, my father in front, jaw tight, arms crossed, Aunt Reagan and Tobias behind him along with two cousins I barely spoke to. I told the guard to let them in. The second they walked through the door, nobody looked at me. They looked at the ceilings, the furniture, the ocean view. The same people who didn't care where I slept the night before suddenly cared very much about my life. "Explain this," my father demanded. "How did you get all this?" "Grandpa left it to me," I said calmly. He laughed, sharp and ugly. "Impossible. You must have pressured him. He'd never leave everything to you." My cousin accused me of hiding the will. Someone else said I must have tricked a dying old man. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody apologized for the suitcase on the lawn. I let them finish. Then I said, "The lawyers have every document. If you think something illegal happened, talk to them." Silence. My father had no comeback. I walked to the door and opened it. "I think it's time for you all to leave." They filed out one by one. My father was last. At the threshold, he turned back and said, "This isn't over." After the gate closed, the house went quiet again. Inside the study, another sealed envelope was waiting, left with instructions not to open it until I was alone. This letter was shorter. My grandfather wrote that the hardest part was just beginning, because truth always makes people uncomfortable. Then, for almost 20 years, someone in this family has been protecting a lie instead of protecting you. I read it 4 times. My grandfather hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me a trail, and he wanted me to walk it slowly on purpose. I barely slept. By morning, I understood why he'd spread the truth across so many letters. If he'd gone through this much trouble, there had to be a reason for the pacing. The attorneys returned with boxes from my grandfather's private office. Inside one, a folder had my name written across the front in his handwriting. Bank statements, legal agreements, notes in the margins. A children's account had been opened for me, money meant for my education, my first home, my future. Except the balance kept shrinking year after year. Every withdrawal carried the same signature, my father's. Next to several transactions, my grandfather had written tiny notes in pencil: "Not approved," asked him to replace funds, no response. Those 4 words hit harder than any scream ever had. I found the next envelope tucked beneath the folder. My grandfather wrote that he'd prayed I would never need to read it, that he'd hoped my father would fix his mistakes before it was too late. That day never came. He said he wasn't trying to destroy his own son, he was trying to protect his granddaughter. People reveal who they are through small choices repeated for years. One selfish decision becomes another until it feels normal, and by the time the damage is impossible to hide, everyone thinks it happened overnight. My father hadn't thrown me out over one bad night. That night was just the excuse he'd been waiting for. The rejection had started years earlier, one quiet decision at a time. I couldn't open the next letter right away. I needed a day to just breathe. That evening, I finally broke the seal on the patio, waves crashing below me. My grandfather wrote that this would be the hardest letter yet, because it was about my mother. Even while dying, she was already planning my future. She met with lawyers. She wrote instructions. She made lists of dreams she hoped I'd chase one day. A few days before she passed, she asked to speak to my grandfather alone. She told him she wasn't afraid of dying, she was afraid of what my father would do once she was gone. She said he'd already grown controlling, impatient, cold. She made my grandfather promise one thing: don't let my daughter face this world alone. She'd prepared savings and letters meant for my future. After she died, those plans quietly vanished. Some were ignored, some were changed, some were never mentioned again. At the bottom of the letter was a photocopy of a page from my mother's journal, her handwriting soft and looping. She wrote that she hoped I'd grow into a woman who never measured her worth by people too blind to see her heart. The last line stopped my breathing: if you ever feel alone, remember my love didn't end when my life did. I sat with that page pressed to my chest for a long time. I finally understood. My mother hadn't abandoned me by dying. Someone else had buried the love she left behind. The next morning, I met my grandfather's accountant and attorney downtown. Thick binders covered nearly 20 years of records. My grandfather had owned several properties and investments, some meant for the family, some quietly set aside for me. My father had never told anyone the full truth about any of it. Whenever relatives asked, he had an answer ready: investments failed, properties sold years ago, nothing left to discuss. Nobody questioned him. My grandfather did. Letters between them showed my grandfather asking again and again for honesty, for missing records to be replaced, for money to be returned. My father always promised to fix it later. Later never came. Years before he died, my grandfather rebuilt his entire estate plan, expecting a fight. Every document was reviewed, witnessed, locked down tight. There was no legal way to challenge it. He loved you very much, the attorney said. He wanted your future to depend on the truth, not on anyone's permission. I left that office carrying one folder. It held everything I needed to stop doubting myself. A week later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to catch up. I ignored most of it until Aunt Reagan called, her voice soft in a way I didn't trust. She asked to meet at a restaurant near the water because the family was struggling. I agreed. When I arrived, she wasn't alone. My father, Tobias, and two other relatives were already seated. Small talk, fake warmth. Then my father got to the point: the family business was failing, bills were stacking up, they needed help. "We're still family," he said, like that erased everything. Nobody apologized. Nobody mentioned the lawn, the suitcase, the night I slept in my car. They just wanted access to what I now had. "I hope things work out," I said evenly, "but I'm not solving problems I didn't create." My father's face hardened. "So you'll just let your family suffer?" "I already know what that feels like," I said, while my family watched. Silence swallowed the table. I left cash for my meal and stood up. "I don't hate any of you," I told them, "but I won't let guilt run my life anymore." Then I walked out, and for the first time, walking away didn't feel like losing. It felt like finally winning something back. Days passed before I could open the final envelope. It sat in my nightstand drawer, untouched, like I already knew this one would close the story for good. That evening, tea in hand, ocean humming outside, I opened it. My grandfather wrote that if I'd made it this far, I was stronger than I ever believed. He hoped I'd stopped carrying guilt that was never mine to carry. He explained the house one final time. It was never about wealth, it was never punishment. Every person deserves one place in the world where they feel safe, respected, and wanted. He reminded me of something he used to say when I was small: a house becomes a home because of who you let inside it. He told me not to waste my life chasing love from people who'd already decided not to give it. Real love never demands proof. Then, forgiveness. Forgiving someone doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to let the pain run the rest of your life. Whether I forgave my father was my choice, no one else's. He wrote that he'd always admired my quiet strength, that even in my worst years I never turned cruel, never stopped caring, even when life gave me every reason to. The final line stayed with me longest: true wealth isn't money or a house with your name on the deed, it's waking up with peace in your heart and the freedom to choose who deserves a place in your life. That freedom can never be bought or taken. I folded the letter and sat in silence, watching the waves for a long, long time. Every question that had haunted me since childhood finally had an answer. I understood my mother's love. I understood my grandfather's years of quiet protection. Most of all, I finally understood my own worth. Months passed. The house stopped feeling like a stranger's home and started feeling like mine. I didn't fill it with expensive things. I filled it with people who'd actually shown up for me, friends who stayed through the hard years, my elderly neighbor who joined me for coffee most mornings, staff who felt more like family than my actual family ever had. I started a scholarship in my grandfather's name at a local college, hoping to catch even one kid who felt as invisible as I once did. One afternoon, security called. My father was at the gate. I stood inside for a long moment before telling them to let him through. He looked smaller than I remembered, older, the confidence gone. I was wrong, he said. No excuses, no blame shifted onto anyone else. He admitted he'd pushed me away piece by piece until there was nothing left between us. He said he'd spent months wishing he could undo it. Then he asked the question I'd imagined hearing for years: can you forgive me? I took a breath. I don't want to spend my life carrying hate. So yes, I forgive you. Relief crossed his face until I kept talking. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give us back the years we lost, and it doesn't mean things go back to how they were. He nodded slowly. I think for the first time, he actually understood. We talked a little longer before he left, quietly watching his car disappear past the gate. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt done, settled, like a wound finally closing instead of festering. That night, I stood on the balcony holding my grandfather's last letter, the ocean stretching out calm and endless in front of me, just like the day I first arrived. Thank you, I whispered to the water, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, for keeping your promise to Mom, for giving me the truth instead of letting my past decide who I'd become. The house was an incredible gift, but it was never the real inheritance. The truth was. And once I knew my worth, nobody, not my father, not anyone, could ever make me feel unwanted.